Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Evening News for today, Friday, July 31st, 2020. I'm Delroy Dash. Thank you for tuning in. In the headline, second royalty payment of US $3.6 million deposited. US announces more visa restrictions against senior Guyanese officials. Justice Narayan Bihari draws from former chancellor on attacks against judiciary. Right to appeals should not be abused, AOS General Secretary says. Guyana records 12 new COVID-19 cases and 25-year-old man dies in Parika Dam accident. And now for the news in detail. We begin tonight's newscast by telling you that Guyana has received the second tranche of royalty payment from oil giant ExxonMobil to the tune of over US $3.6 million. In our lead story tonight, you will hear that this payment now brings the country's total earnings for its oil and gas sector to more than $90 million, which is being held in the Natural Resources Fund account at the New York Federal Reserve Bank. Details in this report.
The second payment of royalty from the oil sector was deposited on Thursday, caretaker Finance Minister Winston Jordan confirmed to the Department of Public Information. In addition to the 2% royalty on oil production in the oil-rich Stabroek Block, Guyana is also entitled to 5 million barrels of oil this year as part of its profit-sharing agreement with the US-based ExxonMobil and its partners operating offshore. Guyana received its first royalty payment of US $4.9 million in May 2020, along with the payments for its crude shipments. Thursday's payments, which amounts to over $774 million Guyana dollars, are gross oil production earnings for the months of April, May, and June. The third royalty payment is expected in October, but Guyana cannot access those funds until Parliament reconvenes. However, with the country currently embroiled in an electoral impasse, it has been warned that this can result in losses for Guyana. During the second quarter 2020 earnings call, ExxonMobil's Senior Vice President, Neil Chapman, noted that without a final resolution of the election result and a new government in place, then this could potentially delay the Payara development plans. Chapman noted that while they are doing everything to progress Payara on schedule, they need a legitimate government to approve the development plans before they can move forward. Reporting for the Evening News, Vanu Manikchand.
Just over 2 weeks after first announcing visa restrictions against government and electoral officials in Guyana who are responsible for undermining democracy here, the United States is moving to widen the net by now issuing visa restrictions on more Guyanese officials. Vanu Manikchand joins us with more.
During a teleconference on Thursday, Acting Assistant Secretary of the Bureau of Western Affairs of the U.S. State Department, Michael Kozak, said the U.S. will continue to act until the David Granger-led coalition accepts the recount results. He said, quote, "Today we are acting to prevent additional senior individuals from that country from entering the United States. The Secretary's been clear. The Granger administration and its allies continue to defy the will of the Guyanese people by refusing to accept the vote count." End quote. On July 15, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced visa restrictions against Guyanese officials and their immediate family members for undermining democracy. Pompeo had subsequently noted that the visa sanctions send a clear message of the consequences of subverting democracy and the rule of law, which pose a danger not just to the U.S. but also the hemispheric partners. As such, Ambassador Kozak noted on Thursday, quote, "The United States joins the rest of the region refusing to go along with this farce. We will continue to act until the Granger administration accepts the will of Guyanese voters." End quote. He reiterated that the recount exercise has been certified as valid by Guyana's and the Caribbean's highest courts, as well as the international observers, including the Caribbean Community CARICOM, which was deemed as the most legitimate interlocutor in Guyana's situation by President Granger. The 33-day recount showed a landslide victory for the PPPC, which obtained over 15,000 votes, more than its main political rival, the PNU-AFC coalition. Reporting for the Evening News, Vanu Manak-Chand.
Amid criticism and racist attack on the judiciary, High Court Justice Priya Sunarayan Bihari, during her maiden Court of Appeal ruling in the Masinga Jones case, drew inspiration from former Chancellor of the Guyana Judiciary, Madam Justice Desiree Bernard. Details in this Lekram Bagirat report.
Justice Priya Sunarayan Bihari delivered her judgment in the Masinga Jones v. GECOM Chair appeal, in which she dismissed the application and upheld the July 20 ruling of Acting Chief Justice Roxanne George. She noted that it is an inescapable fact that the hostile and volatile conditions pervaded the election season in Guyana, more so when cases surrounding the elections are dealt with by the courts. In that regard, she noted that it is apt to echo the words of then Chief Justice Bernard in the case of Aubrey Norton in 1996 to 1998.
The Lord Chief Justice Bernard stated, "It is incumbent on me to stress that at all times respect for our courts and orders emanating therefrom must be maintained, whether right or wrongly made. Judges strive to dispense justice under severe pressures and less than favorable conditions. Very often they make decisions which are not always popular. It is one of the occupational hazards, and we learn to live with it, provided always that we know we have decided fairly and in accordance with the law. However, we hope, and I trust that I speak for all members of the judiciary, that we do not have to carry the additional burden of political pressure from any quarter. We are here to dispense justice fairly and to hold the scales evenly. To put it simplistically, if the law is on your side, regardless of the identity of the litigant, you will win. If the law and judicial precedent is against you, you will lose. Justice must never be tied to political considerations and affiliations if we, as a democratic nation, believe in the separation of powers. That is the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. The independence of the judiciary must be maintained at all times.
The recent series of legal proceedings regarding the protracted electoral process has resulted in many judicial officers coming under attack, mainly by supporters and members of the APNU-AFC coalition. Following the announcement that Justice Sunarayan Bihari would be joining the appellate justices Don Gregory and Rishi Prasad to adjudicate the APNU-AFC-supported Jones appeal, the party's supporters began to launch a series of attacks against her. Justice Sunarayan Bihari also served as Chief Magistrate prior to her appointment as a High Court judge. They called for her removal from the bench and accused her of being corrupt, biased, and unprincipled. This caused the Bar Association to come out and condemn the, quote, inflammatory, malicious, and racially charged statements made through various forms of media targeted against the Court of Appeal, end quote. Meanwhile, GECOM Chairperson retired Justice Claudette Singh and her attorney, Kim Kai Thomas, were also faced with attacks in the recent weeks. Reporting for the Evening News, Lekram Bagirat.
We now tell you that Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Luis Almagro, has reiterated the call for the Guyana Elections Commission to declare the results of the March through general and regional elections using the figures from the national recount. Here's Lekram Bagirat once more with details.
Secretary General Luis Almagro's statements came after the unanimous decision by Guyana's Court of Appeal on Thursday to dismiss the appeal filed by APNU-AFC supporter Masinga Jones, who had challenged Chief Justice Roxanne George's July 20th ruling that figures emanating from the recount exercised must be used as the basis for a final declaration of the March 2nd elections. As such, Secretary General Almagro, in a tweet on Thursday night, said, quote, "The right of appeal is a privilege that should not be abused, especially in deferring the will of the people. Guyana has spoken. GECOM must declare results based on the recount, end quote. The OAS, which had fielded an electoral observer mission to monitor the March 2nd polls, as well as the 33 days recount process, has been vocal about Guyana's current electoral process, calling for the will of the people to be respected. In fact, the OAS Permanent Council met last Thursday to discuss the situation in Guyana, and Secretary General Almagro, making it pellucid that democracy must be upheld in Guyana, had urged that the judiciary stop being the refuge of those who want to do nothing more than delay the declaration of the results of the general and regional elections. The OAS Secretary General had said, quote, "The current situation serves no purpose in Guyana. We call to stop using the judiciary branch to avoid bringing a solution to the country. It's time to make decisions and protect democracy and the will of the people expressed in the elections," end quote. The 33 days recount exercise shows that the People's Progressive Party Civic won the elections with 233,336 votes, while the caretaker APNU-AFC coalition obtained 217,920 votes, a difference of 15,416 votes. Reporting for the Evening News, Clairmont.
A 25-year-old man was killed on Thursday after he lost control of his motorcycle and the vehicle collided with a parked truck. The dead man has been identified as Avinash Suku of Lot 2085, Barika Bagdam, East Bank, Essequibo. According to police reports, Suku was proceeding east along the Parika Bagdam public road, reportedly at a fast rate, when he lost control of the bike and ended up in the opposite side of the road. The front of his motorcycle collided with the parked truck, resulting in the bike breaking into two pieces. Upon impact, Suku fell onto the roadway and sustained injuries to his head and other parts of his body. He was rushed to the Leonora Cottage Hospital, where doctors pronounced him dead on arrival. His body is now at the Ezekiel Funeral Home awaiting a postmortem examination. Police have said the bike Suku had been riding is unregistered. Investigations are ongoing. Guyana records 12 new COVID-19 cases. This and more coming up on the other side of the break. Welcome back. You're watching the Evening News. 12 new COVID-19 cases infection have been recorded today as the pandemic continues to spread throughout Guyana. The total number of coronavirus cases in the country now stands at 413. Here's Rupasina Ryan with details.
All of the 12 new cases recorded today are reportedly from Region 7, Cuyuni-Mazaruni. According to the Public Health Ministry's COVID-19 dashboard, there are 211 active cases, 208 are in institutional isolation, and 3 in the COVID-19 ICU at the Georgetown Public Hospital. Meanwhile, 50 persons are in institutional quarantine. While the number of COVID-19 deaths remain at 20, some 185 persons have since recovered from the life-threatening disease. To date, a total of 4,705 samples were tested. For the month of July, Guyana recorded a total of 165 cases of the novel coronavirus, the highest number of positives ever recorded in 1 month, painting a worrying trend. At the beginning of July, there were 248 confirmed cases with 12 reported deaths. At that time, the active cases stood at 120, which were all placed in institutional isolation. Fast forward to the end of the month, the total now stands at 413 cases with an alarming 20 deaths. This means 8 deaths were recorded in just 1 month. Rupa Sinarayan, The Evening News.
The Federation of Independent Trade Unions of Guyana has expressed great worry over increasing cases of COVID-19 infections in the hinterland locations and has said that lack of resources may greatly impact Guyana's fight of the disease in those areas. More in this report.
In a press statement on Friday, FITAG pointed to reports from officials in Regions 1, 7, and 9 indicating that there is a high concentration of positive cases detected in those areas recently. Deeming the situation as most frightening, the union body also recognized that the new COVID-19 hotbeds are at a severe disadvantage, lacking necessary facilities and needed infrastructure to adequately address the rising cases. These circumstances, it noted, could prove to greatly hinder the fight at such hotspots. The high number of cases in those regions are linked to illegal border entry into the country. FITAG said the unavailability of relevant information is challenging these areas and signaled that efforts must be enhanced to reach remote villages. It went on to lament on the lack of economic reliefs to families who are facing unemployment or other effects of the coronavirus pandemic. With many sectors closed, unemployment rates have increased significantly. Moreover, the economic impact on households have worsened when compared to the initial stages. The Federation went on to say that this is compounded by the unconcluded elections, which has brought on added tensions. Guyana's success, FITAG noted, is heavily dependent on having a legitimate government in place. For July only, Guyana recorded 153 cases of COVID-19 with 8 related deaths. Rupa Sinarain, The Evening News.
After almost 4 months of lockdown and forfeiting an in-person Ramadan in May, the Muslim community in Guyana today observed the Eid-ul-Adha festival with strict measures in place to protect the members from the coronavirus. Lawanda McAllister joins us with more.
Eid-ul-Adha, a festival during which Muslim families and friends unite to pray together and give sacrifices in the form of animal meat, was still celebrated on Friday. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Ministry of Public Health has advised that social gatherings and religious practices be applied differently across the country. As such, mosques in Guyana observed this year's Eid celebration on the strict guidelines. In an interview with this newscast, Mr. Omar Anif, Central Executive Council member of the Central Islamic Organization of Guyana and Deputy Imam of the Queenstown Jama Masjid, explained the importance of the holiday.
This holiday is a commemoration of the sacrifice of Abraham. In Arabic we say Ibrahim, peace be upon him. He's known as the patriarch. He's the father of the Arabs and the Jews. Major religions in the world, the Semitic religions, respect him as the patriarch, and he was commanded by God Almighty to sacrifice his son. He made many sacrifices, himself and his family. He had to leave his homeland because of standing up for the oneness of God. After giving so much, now that he was in his old age, he was blessed with a son, and now he has an heir, and he has someone, when this child became of age, now that he could help the father, then this command came to sacrifice the son. And even that he was willing to do, to sacrifice even the life of his son. And that, according to the traditions in Islam and in Christianity, I think also, that a ram was replaced after he attempted to do it, but it didn't take place because God Almighty took away the ability of cutting from the knife. So we commemorate that every year on the same date. We believe that this is the day that took place, and we sacrifice animals.
Anif explained that one thing the Majids did differently this year was to have the sacrifice done at one place before the distribution.
This year is a bit different because of the pandemic and all that, so we don't have the crowds here. Of course, we have to take precautions. So notice that most people are wearing masks, and we try our best to keep distance and so on. We're not distributing any meat here. Everyone who has done the sacrifice would be responsible to take their meat away and do their own distribution.
Meanwhile, Sajid Khan, the Imam of Kitty Masjid, shared with this newscast how they will be celebrating Eid-ul-Adha this year.
Yes, it is different from previous years. This year, we only have workers who are here on site and members who have a share on an animal that they're sacrificing today. they would only come on site when the animal is finished sacrificed and cut up, prepare for them just to uplift. And so even with regards to the distribution and sharing, we are not doing anything presently. We have made special arrangements to distribute the meat to members and to the poor of the community. And so we have special arrangements from tomorrow.
Along with the slaughtering of animals, Muslims also celebrate this day by making various delicacies such as mitai and others that are usually distributed to the less fortunate neighbors. Reporting for the Evening News, I'm Lawanda McAllister.
Meanwhile, stakeholders today extended Eidul Adha greetings to the Muslim community as its members celebrated the festival of sacrifice with their loved ones. Words resonated for cohesion and compassion towards each other at this time, when the country, like the rest of the world, is grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic. Here's Rupa Sienorai with more.
The People's Progressive Party extended greetings to the Muslim community here in Guyana and in the diaspora on the sacred occasion of Eidul Adha. While noting that this observance comes during the annual holy pilgrimage to Mecca on a journey that symbolizes sacrifices, the party said Eid ul-Adha reminds of unbridled humility and the willingness to selflessly make sacrifices in obedience to God. The party said, quote, "In a diverse society like Guyana, where religious boundaries are often transcended, these attributes have proven their value not only in catalyzing and strengthening bonds among our people, but also in forging a better understanding and appreciation of our rich cultures and religious practices." Unquote. Meanwhile, in his message, President David Granger said the expressions of generosity to the needy fosters cohesion and demonstrate common humanity and concern for others. He said, quote, "Guyanese today are becoming a more caring, considerate, and compassionate people. I pray that the outpouring of charity and concern for others, which is a characteristic of Eidul Adha, will promote greater harmony in our beloved country." Unquote. President of the Central Islamic Organization of Guyana, Al-Hajj Shahabuddin Ahmad, meanwhile called on worshippers to be compassionate and supportive during these uncertain times. According to the CIOG president, Muslims ought to be compassionate and supportive given that the world is filled with crises and obstacles owing to the coronavirus pandemic. Rupa Sienorai, The Evening News.